All right, welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of the Children's Book Insider newsletter and co-creator of writingblueprints.com with my husband, John Bard, who is not with us tonight because he's on an errand. But I'm glad you're all here. And I'm really excited to talk to Tracey West tonight. I think it's going to be a great conversation. So for those of you who are new to the social, we have some business to take care of that we do every week. First of all, if you are watching for the first time and you came directly from a link on Facebook and you want to be notified of all our guests every week, you can do that and get a free goodie. So if you go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet, you will get a free ebook that called the Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet, where we have distilled 30 years of tips for beginners into one free ebook, and that is yours. And you will also get on our list to be notified for future distancing socials, as well as other stuff we do. So it's a great deal. So I hope you sign up for that. For those of you who are subscribers to Children's Book Insider and you have not yet downloaded your September issue, it is online now. If you didn't click directly from the email link John sends out, you can go to the CBI Clubhouse, which is cbiclubhouse.com, and log in with your username and password, and you will be able to download the September issue, which has some amazing articles in it, as you can see right here. And as always, we have an above the slush submission code for you. This month, it's to the Seymour Agency, and that is good through the month. So you get to use that code and move to the top of the slush pile, which is a great deal. And for those of you who are not members of CBI, have not subscribed, we have a special deal for you for our Kidlit Socialites for only $5 a month. You get our newsletter as well as those exclusive above the slush codes every month for either agents or editors, which is really valuable. And we have had people find agents and get book contracts from those above the slush codes. So they work. So writeforkids.org/CBI is where you go to get your subscription for $5 a month. And you also have access to our CBI Clubhouse, which is an online membership site that goes with the newsletter that is packed with all sorts of content from the last 30 years. The Children's Writing Knowledge Base, tons of articles, videos, free webinars, all sorts of stuff on there that you will have access to as well. Okay, where in the world is Laura? So for those of you who are new, I, every month, transport myself somewhere really cool. And you have to guess where I am. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second here so you can see where I am and see if you can guess. Oh, I have to open up my chat box here so I can see you. Where is my chat box? Okay, I have too many things open here. There it is. So anyway, clearly this is not in Colorado. I'll move so you can see this beautiful building. New Orleans, that's a great guess, but no, it's not. It's a literary related landmark. I always do literary related landmarks. And a couple of you guessed New Orleans, and it does look like a New Orleans building, but it's not. It is not anywhere in America. Not in London, Glynis. But you're getting closer. Montreal, no, Alexine, you're getting farther. Somewhere in Europe. I'm just going to tell you it's somewhere in Europe. Copenhagen, good guess. Nope, not France. And it is a literary institution. You don't necessarily have to guess the institution. If you get the country, I'll give it to you. I'll let you have a couple more guesses here. Not Dublin, not Germany, not Italy. Vienna, nope. France, nope, nope. Okay, this is a tough one, I know. Luxembourg, nope. Not Belgium. Good guesses though. We got to go to all those places. Hungary, Copenhagen. No, no, you're too far north. Okay, well, Spain is close. Carol, you're really close with Spain. Okay. Leslie, Scotland, you go. Oh, someone said Portugal. Jane said Portugal. Okay, awesome. Jane, yes, we have Portugals here. You guys win the prize. I will share my screen again and I will show you exactly what this lovely place is. This is Livraria Bertrand, the oldest operating bookstore in the world, founded in 1732 in Lisbon. And wasn't that a gorgeous building from the outside? And inside it is all these really cool tunnels and, you know, nooks and crannies where you can just get lost and read lots and lots of books. So I think that is really, really cool. So if you're ever down Portugal way, you need to check this out. And this particular bookstore is part of a chain. So there's a lot of bookstores with this name throughout the region, but this one is the oldest, 1732. That's really cool. Okay, now I'm going to put my background back since I'm back here. Okay. So now, as always, I want to know, where in the world are you? So I want you to send me pictures of you in front of a literary landmark or somewhere that inspires your writing or doing something writing related. We like to see you. You get to see us every week. And email it to me with a brief description of where you are and permission to use your photo on the Distancing Social, and attach your photo as a JPEG, and I will feature you in a future Kidlit Distancing Social. And I think right now we all need pictures of places that inspire our writing. So we had one last week. It was beautiful botanical gardens in Dallas. I mean, why not? I could be inspired being there. So anywhere like that, anywhere that is meaningful to you, or if you happen to be traveling and you are come across a great literary landmark, send it to us. We would love to see it. Oh, and please put "where in the world" in the subject line. Email it to mail@writeforkids.org. So now we get to celebrate our members, and we have some great celebrations this week. So Deborah Doherty won the Catherine O'Connor Membership Scholarship for the SCBWI Illinois Interactive 2020 Conference in November. And this scholarship was established to celebrate the work of the Illinois Regional Volunteers, with free attendance for one network representative to the fall conference. So congrats, Deborah, not only on winning it, but on being a great volunteer and helping the literary community. And I hope you enjoy that conference. Bill Weber had a Zoom pitch call last week with Cartoon Network for his preschool series, and they asked to read a script and get a copy of his pitch Bible. That is exciting. So Bill, good luck with that. And if you end up getting that contract, we're going to have you come on the social and tell us how to write a pitch Bible. I think that's something we all need to know. So good luck, Bill. Antoinette Truglio Martin's middle grade historical fiction novel Daily Bread was accepted for publication by Red Penguin Books. The first book in a 3-book series, Daily Bread, is coming out in October. A companion book of family food stories and recipes is due in November. And then book 2 in May of 2021 and book 3 in November of 2021. So Antoinette, congratulations on that. And you are going to be very busy for the next year, but that is awesome. I hope those books do well for you. So thank you for celebrating with us. And I want to hear your good news. Any good thing that's happened to you in your writing world, I want to hear about it. So you can email your celebrations to mail@writeforkids.org and put "celebrate" in the subject line, and we will celebrate with you on a future Distancing Social. Okay, we're going to take a poll. This one is a little, whoops, sorry. a little different. We always ask you, like, what's your favorite title? What's your favorite, but now we're just really curious. What kind of books do you like to read when you're reading for pleasure? And this can be adult or children. We're looking at genres here. And this helps us too, because we like to know what you guys are interested in. It helps us create future webinars, bring guests on to the Distancing Social. So this is good information for us to have here too. But I just want to know, what do you like to read? Personally, if I'm just reading for pleasure, I love mysteries. I love anything that just I can't put down because, it's so well plotted. Sharon had really good things to say in the chat box about all our celebrations. Yay! Someday we'll be able to open the chat box up again for everyone to see, and you'll be able to see how happy your fellow socialites are for you. Yeah, we don't have every genre on the list here. This is a short one. We'll come up with another poll later with other stuff, like someone mentioned graphic novels here. Whoop, stop doing that. Okay. All right, 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and polling. And we have mysteries has come up top. And that is something I want to work on maybe for early next year, is getting a webinar with a mystery author who writes mysteries for kids, because I think a lot of people read mysteries for pleasure and might want to learn how to write them. So we're definitely working on that. Oh, did I share results? There you go. Now you can see. Mysteries won. Take my word for it. Okay. Okay, a few links of interest here. So here's some good stuff I found this week for you all. A great blog post called Tag Your It Using Dialogue Tags Effectively by Amy Wilson is on the Good Story Company blog, and it answers all your pressing questions about how to use dialogue tags effectively. And the bit.ly link I created is bit.ly/dialogue tags. And this is great because a lot of writers wonder, how often do I have to have a speech tag on each dialogue? How often do I have to, identify the speaker? Can I use things other than said? Should I use dialogue tags other than said? So this is a great post for you to read to answer a lot of those questions. Here's another great one, 12 top audiobook ads readers want to click, by Carlin Robertson on the BookBub website. And this analyzes, sorry, there's a typo there, analyzes read ads, analyzes ads for audiobooks and explains what makes them effective. So BookBub is a company that helps authors and independent publishers create marketing platforms and that kind of thing. This is a really great article because they took actual ads and they analyzed them, and they said, okay, because the price is here and the graphic is there, and it's great information, even if you are creating your own Facebook ads for your books, even if you're not doing audiobooks. I think you'll get a lot of great tips from this particular article. And it's bit.ly/audiobook ads. And this is a great blog post, Why Writing for Yourself Could Be the Key to Success, by Tom Meitner on the Pro Writing Aid blog. And he makes the case that your work will be better and much better received by your audience if you write what you love rather than worrying about the market and what the market wants right now. So that's bit.ly/write for yourself. And we have always said in CBI and on all our webinars, don't write to trends, because the trend will be over by the time your book is written and sold. But also, you have to love what you're writing about, because you're going to be living with it for a long time. and it shows in your writing if you're not that excited about what you are writing. So one of the reasons we asked you this week what you like to read for pleasure is you should pay attention to that when you're thinking about what you might want to write. Chances are the stuff that you are drawn to reading is probably the kind of thing you might want to write. And there are certain rules in particular genres that you need to be aware of. There's certain tropes, there's certain expectations the audience has in a romance book or a fantasy. And we can talk to Tracey a little bit about fantasy tonight. And you do need to be familiar with those. But if you don't love fantasy, don't write fantasy. That's basically the point here. But anyway, it's a great post, so check it out. Okay, now we get to talk to my guest. So Tracey West is the award-winning best-selling author of, I believe, nearly 120 books. I tried counting on her website and I lost count at some point, over 100, but I think it's around 120. In several series, including the middle grade Cupcake Diaries, written under the name Coco Simon, the Dragon Masters early chapter book series for ages 6 to 8, the Pixie Tricks chapter book series for grades 2 to 3, Heroes Quest chapter books for grades 2 to 5, the Perfectly Princess chapter book series written under the name Alyssa Crown, as well as chapter book novelizations of such well-known properties as Kung Fu Panda movie, She-Ra, and the Princess of Power from Netflix, and Pokemon. So I'm really excited to talk to you tonight, Tracey. So why don't you turn on your camera and we will chat.
Let's see. Hello.
Hi, you did it.
Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here tonight.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you here. You know, my last 3 guests on the Distancing Social have all written 100+ books. And that boggles my mind. Do you all live in an alternate universe where you have like 40-hour days, or how does this happen that you can actually create that many books?
Okay. Well, first of all, in my case, it's more than 300 books.
Oh my gosh.
The website doesn't cover them all. I know it's more than 300 because I moved recently and I was able to count all of the titles I had,
Wow.
saved and collected. And, I've been doing this a long time. So that's one reason. I've been doing it for, I think I stopped counting at 25 years and I think it's a little more. So that's another reason. And I do it as my main vocation. And I've, had the good fortune to be able to write in several different genres and for different publishers. And I make my deadlines, and I just love doing it. So I guess the books keep churning out.
Yeah. Do you have sort of a system down? Do you in order to make those deadlines and be so productive, do you outline? How do you kind of approach each project?
Well, absolutely. I guess this is a 2-part question. I mean, one, for every book I do, I begin with a synopsis. I work with the editor. I write a chapter outline. I hand that into the editor and revise that outline. And I work, then I, write a first draft and a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth. It depends on the book and it depends on the editor. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly a matter of just working every day, just making it a point to sit down and do the work every day and scheduling out my time so I know I can outline this week and I'll be writing the next week. And I keep a lot of lists and schedules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, doing a chapter by chapter outline and sending it to the editor. So you're at a point in your career now where you don't have to write the whole book and send it in and have it be accepted. Do you get editors coming to you with assignments?
Yes. That's the short answer. especially in the field of licensed publishing, where I'm writing novelizations of movies or TV shows, or where I'm writing guidebooks or other kinds of books based on properties. I've been doing it for a long time, so people know that I do it, and I will get calls from editors when those projects come up.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, fiction, original fiction, I used to pitch all the time when I was younger, and then like sort of a couple things happened. Around 2008, when the recession hit, publishers started doing a thing where they were coming up with series and story ideas in-house. I don't know if you've discussed this with other authors, but where publishers come with the ideas and then they seek out authors to write them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what started to happen with me during that time. So I wasn't necessarily pitching as much, but getting to sort of work with fun properties, or sometimes I get just a word or a title and, can you create this? Can you make something out of it? And but that, I think, comes from working in the industry for such a long time and having a reputation and knowing different editors.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I imagine you probably, some of those properties you were working with book packagers instead of publishers, or it doesn't really matter. I just wonder.
I actually got my career working for a book packaging company.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of how I got into writing. I figured, well, if I can get a job in children's book publishing, maybe I'll be able to write books. And I didn't have any basis for that guess, but it turned out to be a good guess, because that's how I got to meet editors. And it's obviously a lot easier to pitch ideas when you know somebody. And I worked for a company called Mega Books that packaged, speaking of mysteries, all the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys mysteries. And I sort of cut my teeth coming up with story ideas and outlines for all of those mystery books. And that gave me the confidence to start writing fiction.
Yeah, that's great. Well, at some point we'll have a guest on the social talking about book packagers. Way back in the 80s, I worked for a book packager as well. So they're similar to publishers. They conceive the series and they find the writers and basically produce the entire books, but they'll put like Scholastic on the cover, and then Scholastic sells the books through their website.
Yeah, they do the work for the publishing company.
They do the work. They're like subcontractors. Yes. Okay. Great. Well, let's talk about chapter books then.
Sure.
You've written for the Branches imprint, which is the really young chapter books for that's Scholastic, and then you've written some slightly older chapter books. Can you kind of differentiate for us the difference between the really young chapter books and sort of the traditional chapter book?
Sure. The Branches series is a very specific series of books created by Katie Carella, who is the editor of the series, and she's got a master's in education. And the idea is to branch between early readers and chapter books. And this helps readers build confidence when they're reading a chapter book with very short chapters, easier vocabulary, shorter sentences, easy to decode text, exciting text. And so there are some, I don't want to use the word restrictions, but more guidelines when writing for that age group. You were talking, the topic of dialogue tags, at that age group, you really do have to attribute the speaker for every single line of dialogue that's uttered, because it's much easier for kids to follow along. I can't use every vocabulary word I want to use to describe something. I always have to use the easier to decode word. And presenting the ideas, you can present complex ideas, but you have to just make sure every bit of that complex idea is explained to the reader, or at least that's what I'm finding in writing Dragon Masters, because that was one of those cases where Scholastic contacted me and said, Branches needs a dragon series, and we don't want it to be for young readers, dragon stories are usually kind of silly or sweet or cute. And they said, we want this to be serious fantasy, but for 6-year-olds, and it should be about dragons. And so I thought that was a pretty cool challenge. And to present serious fantasy for 6-year-olds, you know, is not the easiest thing to do. And but I love doing it, and it seems to be working out. And I sort of learned not to take these readers for granted and what they're hungry for and what they're able to comprehend and understand. And they want complicated plots. Yeah. They really do. And so it's just sort of a challenge of trying to make the writing poetic, which I still haven't mastered yet, but to try to write something beautiful yet simple, and easily decodable for those kids. Whereas when I'm writing, I do a lot of middle grade fiction, you know, for the Cupcake Diaries, for example, and those it's a little bit freer. A lot of those are in first person, so I'm just sort of writing like I'm having a conversation, and I'm not really thinking about, you know, with those I'm being more conscious of, am I getting the voice of this character correct? But I'm not worried about any of those other concerns usually.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, and Branches is really on the young end of the chapter books. So these are for kids who are reading independently, but they're fairly newly independent readers. They you know, second grade, like you said, is probably sort of the
even some first graders who open up a chapter book with no picture. You know, you're taking, here's 3 lines on a page and a picture every page, and suddenly you're expecting kids to go to a book with no pictures at all, and lots of words on the page. So every series in Branches has pictures on every page, and some are more like graphic novels and have full color art. Dragon Masters has black, you know, beautiful black and white art, but there's art on every page in Branches.
But the books aren't that long. They average what, maybe 2,000 words, 1,500 to 2,000.
Dragon Masters is on the longer end, and also the upper reading level of Branches. So my books are 6,000 words.
Oh, they're much longer.
And that is, I cannot go above it cannot be 6,001 words.
Wow. Okay.
So I end up doing a lot of cutting, which is, you know, as all writers know, cutting is painful.
Yes.
And so maybe there's a little bit of compromise that goes in to a book like this, but I also have a background in educational publishing, where I wrote a lot of titles for early readers to be used in the classroom. I used to work on, you know, phonics titles, and so I'm used to being very, very restricted, and Branches is a lot less restrictive than that. So maybe I had good training in the educational publishing.
Yeah, definitely.
You know.
Well, and I'm just checking my audio here. Someone told me I'm a little hard to hear. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. I think I might have bumped the microphone at one point. Just let me know in the chat box if you can hear me now, please. So thank you. Writing a fantasy story in 6,000 words, you've got, you know, not only telling a full-blown story in 6,000 words with chapters is tough. That's a restrictive length. But then fantasy, you want to have some world building in there. You want to have a lot of this other stuff going on. So how do you choose when you have a genre like fantasy that normally runs longer than average? How do you choose which parts of the fantasy genre to put into an early chapter book?
Which parts of well, I think you still have to have all of the parts if you're talking about magical creatures, humans with the ability to do magic, villains, locations that we've never seen, and hero plots where our characters solve a problem. I don't think you'll find that Dragon Masters has left any of those out. So yeah, so I guess in a way they are, it is a bit of a puzzle figuring that out. One thing I will say, that because it's a series, if I just had to write one Dragon Masters book, it probably would not have been as rich as me writing book number one, knowing that there would be, in the beginning, I knew there would be at least 4 books. And I wrote a story arc that expanded over those 4 books, so that I knew that I could introduce the villain a little later. I knew I could have character growth a little later. It all didn't have to happen in one book. And then as the series progressed, sometimes I would be hired to write 2 more books. 4 more is always more fun, but if it weren't a series, I think, yeah, it would be challenging.
Definitely. And now in chapter books in general, do you keep subplots to a minimum? Is there pretty much just the one main plot line going through the book?
I would say in Branch's books, and especially, you know, I'm speaking as a Dragon Masters author, I don't almost never have a subplot. In the middle grade novels, always a subplot.
Yes. Well, that's what I've noticed. For the earlier chapter books, there's usually no subplot, or if there's one, it's really simple. It's very connected to the main story. And then as you get into the older books, obviously middle grade are the subplots. So let's talk about, there's an older chapter book that's still between these branches and true middle grade, where it's more for, I mean, when I started in publishing, they were called for ages 7 to 10, you know, so we're talking shorter novels than middle grade, but more complex than the branches. So do some of your books, do you feel fall into that category?
You know, I'm going to say oddly, maybe not. You know, maybe actually, no, that's wrong. So the first series, all right, I have written a couple, for some reason, I love to pitch series. I'm just a series person. Maybe that goes back to starting off working on the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys book series. And, you know, also as a writer, it's great to have a series.
Yeah.
So my first series, which I wrote with some friends of mine, was called Great Uncle Dracula. And those were in that area, that 7 to 10 area, that's what I grew up reading.
Right.
You know, and I sort of, so that's why my first book, original book, was like that. And my friend Bonnie and Bader and I collaborated on a series called Spooky School, which again is more of that 7 to 10, where you do have a little more, well, yeah, a lot more freedom than dealing with a newly emerging reader, a newly independent reader. Yeah.
And I think it feels to me now in publishing, more and more we have the age groups are getting sliced into smaller chunks. So it used to be a very clear designation. This is a chapter book, this is a middle grade. Now it can kind of go either way depending on the age of the character. And so when you're writing, say you're writing a novel with a 10-year-old protagonist, do you have to know up front, this is going to be a middle grade book, or this is going to be a chapter book for ages 7 to 10? Do you need to know that up front because you're going to write them differently? Or do you just write it and then say, okay, here's where it fits?
Maybe a novelist would give you a different answer. As someone who mostly writes for series, it's usually very specific. If it's a 10-year-old character and it's in that younger version, it's a very specific, usually the word count is maybe 10,000 to 12,000 words. And you know what the parameters are. You know, in Cupcake Diaries, it's a middle grade series, but you know, it's very specifically no YA themes at all, even though it's about girls in middle school. It's a very G-rated kind of series. Those are the parameters of that. So those are usually the only kinds of parameters I get is just knowing who the audience is.
Right.
Where the novelist might start from a place of just telling a story and not being concerned about who the audience is.
Right. Right. I think it's important to know who your audience is, especially when you're in that younger, you know, age, even in young middle grade. I think it's personally, I just feel it's really important. And I found the writers who are very conscious of their audience, I think, have more success in creating a book that doesn't need a lot of revision down the road. So a lot of your books are fantasy based and or have magical elements and that kind of thing. So in other authors I've talked to who write fantasy, they have told me that it's important that magic is not used to solve the character's problem in the book. Like they have to solve it somehow on their own without someone coming in and going, here's a magic wand for you to make it all go away. Do you agree with that?
I'll be honest that that's something I never thought about, but that I think it's something I have probably done without thinking about it, if that makes any sense. Especially with kid protagonists, you want to make sure they're the ones solving the problem. That's for sure. So, however, in Dragon, I'm talking about Dragon Masters a lot, but that's sort of really taking over my life right now. In each Dragon Masters book, we have a new dragon, we introduce a new Dragon Master and a new dragon with a different power. And that was a decision we had to make in the beginning. Do we want to keep going with our original 4 characters, or do kids want to see a new dragon and a new Dragon Master? And it turns out, yes, they did. And so I'm coming up with new worlds and new characters in each little 6,000 word book. But this is my long way of saying that in Dragon Masters, the dragon's powers do often solve the problem. But those are the powers that intrinsically belong to the dragons. And so
right.
I think
well, and there's still a character arc for the human characters in your books, and that's I think that's really was the underlying point that these other authors were making, is your character has to grow in a way that allows them to eventually put themselves in the position to solve a problem or influence the other characters in a way to solve the problem or something. You can't just have a magic spell come along and make everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What other things do we have to think about with fantasy? Like you said, are there certain tropes that are just sort of have to be there no matter what age you're writing for?
I think you always have to have magical creatures. I went heavy on the wizard trope. I'm not sure why I made that decision, but for me, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and so here in Dragon Masters we have another wizard with a white beard. What are you going to do? But I think magical creatures, especially for children, are key to fantasy. You have to have those, and not just a bunch of magical humans. That would be my 2 cents. But
I agree. Well, and fun. The books have to be fun to read, Very important. So when you're creating a series, do you sort of conceive the entire series arc up front and then figure out what's going to happen in each book, and or how do you go about doing that?
Well, when I've pitched series, instead of being asked to say work on a series like Cupcake Diaries, I usually say yes, I do try to think how long could this story, how long can I extend this story arc for? And if I'm pitching, I make it as long as possible, because why not? And absolutely try to show this is where our characters in our story begin, and this is where they could end up. And I'll also include, here are some other ways we could take the story once this 8-book story Yeah, I'm big on very detailed proposals for
Mhm.
series, and I think editors do like to see, oh, we could take the characters this way or that way or this other way, because you want to think of a series that could, continue.
Mhm.
So I think that's kind of very important to sort of really think beyond your first book.
Right, right. And what are some elements of when you're conceiving a series, if someone was conceiving a series, that would make it an idea that could continue? Does there need to be some hook that holds all the characters together? Does there need to be, can it be a world? Can it be a, I'm thinking of even like back in the 80s, we had the Babysitters Club, and or Goosebumps, which is the packager I worked for, created Goosebumps. Those were sort of, each book stood alone, but there was this overarching concept to the series.
Mhm.
So you can't just have four characters who you just write about over and over. Doesn't there have to be an idea that
Right.
carries through?
Well, and sometimes the idea is very simple, as four friends who have a babysitters club or four
Mhm.
friends who have a cupcake club.
Right,
Sometimes that's
exactly,
all you need.
exactly.
In a fantasy story, sure, whatever world you create is your jumping off point. And um, if you have enough elements in that world that are interesting or going to grab a reader's attention, then yeah, you can
Mhm.
keep taking that into all over the place.
Right. Now your cupcake diaries, or I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the Cupcake Diaries. Yeah, we were talking about Babysitters Club, and I was going to say Cupcake Club, and I was like, that's not right. Cupcake Diaries. That's such a great concept. Can you explain that a little bit? And I wonder what kind of feedback you've gotten from readers about that whole concept.
Well, here's the interesting. I think I'm allowed to tell this story. So back in the mid 2000s, Barnes and Noble, this is the story I heard, went to every publisher and said, pitch us a middle grade series about cupcakes. And so Simon and Schuster, the team there, they came up with the basic idea, and they gave me an outline for the first book and said, we're going to use some other writers on this, but can you write this first book? And that's how that started. And that surprisingly, that series just keeps going and going. I think it's a lot quieter than, say, a Babysitter's Club, but it has a lot of fans, and girls really respond to it. And it might be because it's that middle grade series that doesn't delve into YA. And I think we get younger than middle grade readers for it, who like to read about girls who are a little older than they are.
Yeah.
And the stories are really, they're empowering stories. They're about friendship, and they're fun too. So
I think there's still a lot of room for that really classic middle grade type of story. And a lot of our customers who are getting into writing are worried that there's no room for that kind of thing anymore. They say, that's what I want to write. But I think there still is. I think that's a very timeless kind of book.
yeah, I mean, Cupcake Diaries, they keep asking me to write more. They keep asking us to write more. So there is, I think there is a market out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how is it different when a publisher hands you a series concept or an outline, and then you have to write the book? Is that harder, or is it just different? Is it just a different kind of writing or work?
I think it's just different, and I want to say too, a lot of times it's not. I have to still come up with a proposal and sample chapters, and if a publisher doesn't like it, then you don't get hired to do it. So it's not always a thing, but most publishers are happy to let you bring you into the writing and present your own ideas for how the series could look or the characters could behave. And I've had that fortune with every time I've done it, basically, where I have a lot of freedom. And so and I love to write. So it's like somebody giving you a story starter and you run with it. Like everybody likes to do that. That's fun.
That's awesome. When you're writing for a series like that, where several authors are writing for the series, do you have to have a tone or a voice that's consistent from book to book? Or are you allowed to really bring your own voice into the writing?
No, that's one of the requirements, is to have a consistent tone. So if I write book 1 and then I'm going to write book 3, I make sure to read book 2, and the other authors do the same. And if you're lucky to be the author who writes the first book, then you get to set the tone.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So, oh, there's my husband. Hello, John.
Hi,
I
John.
don't even know if he knows he's on.
He's doing a Kilroy thing here right now.
He does have a Kilroy thing. I'm going to stop his video. I bet he was tuning in to watch it and he didn't realize his video was on. Anyway, yeah, because someone asked in the Q&A, is Cupcake Diary still written by many authors? So the answer would be yes, then it's still yes, yes. Which is why there's that pen name that I assume everybody.
Coco Simon, yes.
Coco Simon.
And honestly, after a while, there were so many requests for, can you do school visits? Can Coco Simon do this? That Simon and Schuster just let myself and Liz and the other author, just say we write as Coco Simon. They just kind of, let us be honest about it. So
cool. It's a cool name. I like it. So I have a few questions here. Melva asks, how do you bridge between book 1 and 2 of a series and not have to repeat the previous plot? So do you have to, in book 2, have to sort of sum up what happened?
Yeah, and it's just the worst. Oh, it's so hard to do. And some authors are great at it. It's a thing I think I need to get better at. In Dragon Masters, the story arcs are very popular. Kids like the story arcs. So I just think, all right, well, if they like the story arcs, they don't mind the recap on pages 1 and 2 every time. And because this is for early readers, and those rules apply of making everything clear to the reader, I can't get away with letting the reader infer what might have happened. I'm not allowed to do that. Mm-hmm. I am required to be very specific about what happened in the past. And so the challenge for me is to find ways of doing that seamlessly or organic to the story.
In as few words as possible, too.
But some of my chapter ones, I struggle with them. But and then so now I have a little more freedom in the series to do, after a story arc, I'll do just a standalone story where I don't have to do a lot of recap, and that just makes me happy.
That's nice.
But the readers love the story arcs, so.
Well, yeah, they do. Coming back. Yeah. So when you have a series with a continuous arc like that, does each book still have to have sort of a story that resolves within that book?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But then you can have a few sort of overall loose ends that are going to be picked up in the second book?
Yes, my editor just recently called me the master of cliffhangers, which, like, woo, that made me super happy. But and as, let me say, as a consumer, cliffhangers give me so much anxiety. like I really don't like them, yet now every Dragon Masters book ends in a cliffhanger, and a lot of my chapters end in cliffhangers too. It's for especially for this level, it's something you want to do because you want to encourage that reader to keep going and get to the 13th chapter or the 14th chapter. And how do you do that? And cliffhangers are so important. So I spend a lot of time making sure that, a lot of that happens at the outline stage. Outline stage is where I work out all my cliffhangers.
Sure.
And sure. Katie will tell me, my editor will tell me, you need a better cliffhanger here. So most of that usually gets worked out before I sit down to write.
Yeah. Now, when you're writing for middle grade, are cliffhangers as important, or I guess it depends on the kind of story you're writing too?
I think, cliffhanger is a very dramatic word. In middle grade, you still have to find a way to make the reader want to keep going. And whether that's, I can't, the character doesn't know what to do or how to feel. It could be something sort of soft and small, but it has to be something that compels you. So it doesn't have to be a super dramatic cliffhanger, but yeah, I think when you're a chapter book writer, I think cliffhangers are important because you really want the reader to keep going.
Right. So we had a specific question here about how you create cliffhangers. And again, there's lots of ways to do that depending on the story, but what are some of your favorite cliffhanger types?
Some of my favorite well, there's always the fake out cliffhanger, not the fake out cliffhanger. There's let's call it the imminent danger cliffhanger. That's like the easiest one. So, the very first chapter of Dragon Masters, Drake opens a door and a fire dragon comes out and shoots a fireball at him. And we don't know, what happens. So that's the imminent danger. So with dragons, you can have a lot of cliffhangers like that.
Yeah.
I decision cliffhangers, what will I do if I do this? I could fail. If I do this, I'll hurt somebody. Those always work. Yeah, I'm sort of as the I'm calling myself the master of cliffhangers, and I'm not thinking of great examples.
Well, I imagine in middle grade, you can probably the cliff, again, depending on the story, could be less action oriented. They might be a dialogue, cliffhanger.
Right. Correct. A lot of, I'll admit that some middle grade cliffhangers are, my life is over,
yes.
that kind of thing, or I'm never going to talk to her again, those kinds of things.
Sure.
But you just have to interview a lot of middle school kids to figure out what good middle school cliffhangers would be. Ask them what upsets them, ask them what makes them laugh, ask them what makes them sad. And
sure. Embarrassment works.
Yeah.
Big time in middle school. Okay. Dylan asks, how long into the book should you start establishing that story arc? How do you have to get right into the plot right away, or can you take a little time at the beginning?
I think as a general rule, you have to pretty much hint, by in a chapter book where you're not dealing with a lot of text or a lot of chapters, really by the second chapter, you should have an idea of what that story arc is going to be. Or at least what the problem you're setting up in the first book is going to be. Then you could get to, if you're planning on taking that problem into 2 or 3 or 4 books, you can of course wait till even the end of the book to do that. I don't know if that makes sense, but
so we had another question of how you develop a story arc, which is a huge question, and I don't know if you have a quick answer for it. But just sort of, can we talk just briefly about sort of the parts that have to happen? Do you work with 3-act structure, for example, or do you have another system? Do you work with having an inciting incident or something like that happen early on? Or do you even worry about, is it more instinctive for you at this point?
I guess I would say I start out by thinking of what the end game is. And then I look at how many books, if we're talking about a story arc, then we know in advance how many books you're going to have, right? So if I know I have 4 books and I know I'm starting with the wizard, there's a wizard attacks using magical orbs. I'll use Dragon Masters as an example. But by the 4th book, we want to see the wizard attacking the castle on a dragon. I have to think, how do I get there? And so what can happen in books 2 and 3 that are unique, that have their own problem, but there's a little something in there that's going to lead me to that wizard at the end.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, basically it's thinking about the ending and then going back to the beginning and
Mm-hmm.
and just imagining what kind of problems would my characters have getting to that end point.
Sure.
What could happen along the way that could lead to a whole new story.
Right. Do you, and so then you break it up like one problem per book that leads them eventually to the point where you want them to get
I
to?
would I would say that's
Hmm.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We're making you work hard tonight.
Oh, that's
Thinking about
okay.
your system here. I know it's hard. Once you've been doing it for so long, you probably don't even think about how you're doing it. You just do it. And then someone asks, how do you do that? And it's like, why? It's hard to break it down.
Yeah.
Like
I
I said,
just think. I just think. No.
it just flows out of me. So we have a question here. You are so prolific. How does your work day look? Do you have a writing work schedule or do you just work all the time?
Um, it has evolved over the years. Basically, my mornings are spent on publishing business that is not necessarily writing. So we all know there's a lot of that stuff to do, like social media and answering letters and reaching out to editors and answering emails. So unless I'm on a serious deadline, I don't often write in the morning anymore. And then it's lunch and then it's an afternoon of writing every day. And often it's 7 days a week. That's the schedule. They're all like
Mm,
days just kind of
yeah,
blend
yeah.
in.
It's very disciplined. Do you ever find it hard to stick to that anymore? Or is it just so ingrained in you that you just do it?
Um, the pandemic has made it hard to concentrate on just about anything, I'll be honest. And I find myself being much less disciplined, but I feel like I'm getting back into it. But that's really the only thing
Hmm.
that cut into my discipline. So
Right.
it took that to
Yeah.
break down, I
I
guess.
think everybody's had that issue. You're not alone.
Yeah.
So speaking of, I know you write for a lot of big publishers. Have you noticed any of their publishing schedules being altered due to the pandemic? Or is it pretty much business as usual as far as you can see?
Um, I work for a variety of publishers, and I did have a couple of titles that were put on hold that I'm waiting to hear about. But I know, I believe that publishers are working as hard as they can to keep things business as
Mhm.
usual. And people certainly do need books during a pandemic, perhaps now more than ever.
Absolutely.
And so I think the challenge is getting books into the hands of people or onto the screens of people. Maybe it's a bit easier, but um, and I know authors, we're all struggling to get the word out about our books. So
Mhm.
but there's some great, everyone's great virtual events happening now, so that's helpful.
Sure.
But we're not doing book festivals, we're not doing school visits, in-person school
Mhm.
visits, we're not doing book signings in stores. So I think time, it's gonna, in a few months we'll kind of all know how that has affected
Yeah.
our book
Yeah.
sales.
Well, I'm glad that they're trying their best to stay on track
They are.
as much as possible. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, how do you find children beta readers? Milva asks. Or do you ever let kids read your manuscripts or works in progress and get feedback?
I do not. I don't.
Mhm.
Um, I don't. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I guess that might be a good idea, but I don't usually.
Most authors I know don't either. Because well, depending on the kid, if it's a picture book and you're reading a picture book story to a young child, they're going to love the fact that you're sitting there reading to them. So I'm not sure the feedback would be, helpful. But what about, you mentioned earlier, find some middle schoolers to talk to if you want to know what bothers them or what they worry about. Do you ever do that? Do you ever actually go?
Oh, I do that all the
Very
time.
good.
So to
Okay.
me, that's more a part of the pre-writing process.
Mhm.
Um, absolutely. I was a middle schooler myself once. I raised middle schoolers, but if I were to sit down to write it, now it's like I feel like I have to talk to middle schoolers all the time because what their energy is just constant. It changes every year, and you need to really stay in contact with that, I think.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Um, do you just go into classrooms and talk to the kids? Or I mean, do you do school visits with your books?
I have done in the past, but mostly it's reaching out to friends with
Mm.
kids
Yeah.
and saying, "Can I come over and talk to your kid for an hour?" And I'll
Yeah. Good way to do it.
ice cream, or I'm blessed with a lot of nieces and nephews who have helped me over the years, and admittedly, it's a very small sampling, but it's still
Yeah,
helpful.
that's great. That's great. What about if you're writing contemporary, like middle grade? Do you worry about slang and things like that?
Oh, all the time, all the time. And I don't think, um, I guess the best way to do it is to try to avoid slang as much as possible and but still trying to make the dialogue real. But I always struggle. I'll always reach out to someone and say, if you're leaving a room, like I get very specific. If you're waving to your friend in the hall, what do you say? If you're leaving a room, what do you say to your friend? How do you say to your friend that they're wearing a nice shirt? Like, um, so I try to keep as current with the current time as I can, and try not to use words that are, you can sort of tell are really not going to last. But
Hmm.
I usually ask very specific questions of kids to
Yeah.
get it right.
Yeah. And I think the slang, if you do use any, it has to be understandable enough 5 years from now when
Mhm.
kids aren't using those words anymore.
Right.
They have to still be able to know what the character's saying. So nothing too weird.
But
So,
I do use a lot of emoji exchanges. The characters do text each other a lot, but
okay, well, that's probably not going
the
away.
emoji language seems to remain consistent, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, those emojis will be clear
Yes.
10 years from now, even if
Right.
we're not using them anymore. So, um, let's see. I have a couple really good questions here. Let's see. Oh, Melva has just a side question about that. She says, a lot of changes in schools. Since I was a kid, schools will not let us tour the locations. So you can't just go in and walk around. No. Besides interviewing teachers, are there other means of learning current school days? Well, talking to any teachers is a great idea.
Yeah.
And of course, like you suggested, if you have friends with kids or family with kids, I think that's really the best way to go about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
I see a lot of writers like reaching out on Twitter all the time, especially if you
Yeah.
have a lot of teachers in your feed, you get great answers that way.
Or, the Facebook group Kidlit 411 is a great resource because there's a lot of writers on there who are also teachers, and people ask those questions all the time. Teachers, can you tell me how you spend your day, or that kind of thing, and you'll get a lot of great response. Yeah, that's a great idea. Do you recommend writers who want to either propose series or find licensed property projects to have an agent? Do you think that's necessary, or is it more just getting a certain level of experience?
I think so. I have never had an agent, and I still don't know if that's the best decision or not. But I don't, and that comes from having worked in the publishing industry, and
Sure.
that's just how I got in. So I think it's always helpful to get an agent, but I honestly think agents don't. So if you write for a licensed property, that's something called writer for hire, which means you're not getting any royalties. And often, what I have heard is that agents don't rep writer for hire writers. They're looking for
Right.
people coming up with their own ideas.
Mhm.
So for that part of the question, I would say, if you have any contacts with any editors at all in children's publishing, they could probably, and I would say if you want to write licensed properties, it should be something you're really passionate about. Because, you know, I've written for cartoon series and other things where I've watched weeks and weeks of, hours and hours of cartoon episodes just to prepare to write a guidebook or to prepare to write an original novel. You have to really love the characters. You have to love the property. You have to be willing to watch hours of it. And if you are going to contact the editor in charge of that license, it's helpful to say that you have knowledge about it, as opposed to, I'm interested in writing licensed work, can you help me? I mean, that's how I got the Pokemon gig all those years ago, was just being known as someone who was passionate about Japanese animation. And so I would say, don't just do it because it's maybe a way to earn a living, I mean, which is great, but do it because you're passionate about animation and cartoons, or that particular show, or that particular property.
Mhm.
And if you can convey that somehow to the editor, you
Right.
have a
Right.
chance.
That's great. That's great advice. And so, for those of you who are wondering, how do I find out who the editors are? You want to look inside the book on the copyright page or the title page and see who the publisher is, or if it's a book packager, their name's going to be somewhere on the inside of the book, even though the outside of the book says Random House or Scholastic or something like that. And go on their website and see if they have a submission policy where they're looking for work for hire authors. I think that would be a way to go about that. When you're writing for licensed characters, I imagine you talked about getting, this sort of series Bible or whatever when you're writing for an established series. I imagine with licensed characters, it's even more restrictive because the license is so protected. So do you have to worry about having the characters do things that they might not do on the animated show, or, did you feel restricted?
Yeah, it's absolutely very restrictive, but I would say maybe 75% of licensed publishing is based on existing product, or where you're just recapping a TV show, or well, maybe not 75%, I think it's less now. And so when you get to the point when you're allowed to write original stories with the characters, you absolutely have to stick to the way those characters behave, speak. You have to, and the licensor might give you other guidelines. And so, you can still have fun and you can still be imaginative, but you have to be prepared for the licensor to come back and say, no, you can't have a purple spotted elephant in that scene because that would not exist in this world. And then you have to scrap your whole story and come up with a new one,
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and sometimes it seems like very, why can't I have the purple spotted elephant? You have this yellow striped, zebra. But anyway, but no, you can't do the elephant. So it's just, but it's, it can still be a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I imagine. Okay, well, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. You've been wonderful hanging out with us so long here. Jeanette asked if Tracey's books are available. Yes, they are. You can go to traceywest.com, TRACEY west.com, and see all her books. And a lot of them are published, I noticed, by Scholastic and big publishers, so you can find them in bookstores.
Indiebound.org, right?
Yeah, right. There's a couple more serious questions here. I'm trying to pick the one that's the most general. If your character is if you're writing a multi-book series based on adventures a character has, how many adventures would your character have in one book, not to give them too much and have them be able to come back for more? So I guess you don't want to have them do all the good stuff in book one. Basically, I think what she's asking is, do you have to parse out the excitement?
Yes, you do. And in book one, you can, take a little more time introducing the characters in the world, because that's going to be interesting to your reader and draw the reader in. And so you can save some of the bigger stuff for later.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, I feel that the best way to learn the pacing of a series is to read a bunch of series books, and it'll give you a sense of sort of the model that you want to try to follow with your own work. So go on Tracey's website, look at all of her mini series, and start reading them, because that's going to be the best education you can get right there. Definitely. One last question, and I don't know if since you don't have an agent, someone asked that they had heard that it was difficult for new authors to break into those real early chapter books. And I'm not sure if that is true or not, except I know that Scholastic, who does Bridges, generally doesn't just take submissions, unsolicited submissions from authors, but other publishers might.
Yeah, there are other publishers doing books at that level. So, I think if you have a terrific idea, you're going to get the attention of an editor always. Maybe that comment is coming from, it might take a more experienced writer to be able to craft a story at that level and still make it exciting and compelling with those restrictions on vocabulary and sentence length and things like that. So maybe that's why an editor or a publisher would look for somebody a little more experienced.
Possibly. But again, like you said, if you can demonstrate in a manuscript that you know how to do that, in my experience with the writers that I work with, and we work with a lot of people who are aspiring writers, fewer people are trying to break into that early chapter book market than, say, picture books or middle grade or YA. So that is a plus, I think. But they're also not easy to write. They're you have to really have the knack of telling that sophisticated story, but in a simpler way for the kids who are newly independent readers. So it's a skill set. It's a very specific skill set, I think. But I think if you've got it, editors are going to love you.
Yes. You're right. I think you're right.
Great. Well, Tracey, I'm going to ask you, do you have one final parting bit of advice for all of our viewers here that you can leave us with to help them write over 300 books?
Oh my goodness. Just start writing. That's what I do when I'm stuck. I just sit down and type whatever I have an idea of what I want to write, and I just start typing, and it's never great, it's never perfect, but it leads to me finishing, and it's better than not starting at all. So just start. Don't worry about if it's going to be perfect on the first time. It never is.
No. That practice is so important, and just persistence. I think just sticking with it is really the key there. I always feel that skill is oftentimes more important than talent, and you can develop skill because that's what's going to really carry you through the long haul in a lot of ways. So, well, Tracey, thank you so much for being here tonight. We've been great. I'm getting a lot of great comments in the chat box that they've learned a lot. Really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you so much. And everybody go to Tracey's website, traceywest.com, and look at all her books and read them. And we'll wait to see more that you come up with. We can't keep up.
Yes, there is more on the horizon. So, wow, no, this was a lot of fun. I can't believe people enjoy hearing about stuff like this, so that's great.
Yeah,
You
we're
know,
all writing nerds here, so we love hearing about this.
okay, good. So you know that most of us live in caves and don't get to talk to people very often. So this is a lot of fun. Thanks.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, we appreciate it so much. Oh, Eric says, I ordered 1 to 14 of Dragon Masters.
Whoa.
So there you go.
Thank you, Eric.
Well, on this call. Whoa. There you go. It was worth it.
Excellent. I hope you enjoy them.
I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will. All right. Well, thanks so much. And thank you everybody for being here. And we'll see you next week.
All righty. Thanks,
Bye.
Lorna. Bye.
Bye.